Hello everyone, I'm Darlene Young from Arlington, and welcome back to another segment of our series, Mindful Health Alternatives. The goal of this series is to introduce you to a more healthy and less stressful lifestyle through several different methods. Our guest today is Molly Beveridge, who has a complete Chinese medical practice and also is a licensed acupuncturist who practices in both Wells and Dorset. Welcome, Molly. And I'd like to invite you to I'd like to welcome you to the show. And please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much, Darlene, for putting together this series. It's a wonderful benefit to this community to be able to learn about so many of the different alternatives that we have available in this day and age. As Darlene mentioned, I am a traditional Chinese medical practitioner. And I originally got a Bachelor of Science in Biology many years ago. And then in 2001, I earned my Master's of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine degree from the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine. So I've been in practice for more than 12 years. I'm licensed in the state of Vermont, and I have national board certification with our national board, which is the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. So today I'm going to talk to you about what I do in my practice. And so we've broken up this Chinese medicine into two parts. And the first part will be me talking about what I do. The second part's going to be an actual live interview and small treatment on someone who's going to be coming into the studio. So to begin, I just want to give an overview of what I'm doing. I want to tell you a little bit about how Western medicine is trying to understand Chinese medicine and some of the studies that are being done. I'd also like to talk to you about some of the modalities that I use in my practice on a daily basis that help me treat the people that I work with. There'll be a little bit of history, not too much, but just to give you an idea of how old this medicine really is. And then I'm going to talk to you about some of the concepts of Chinese medicine. And again, they're very complicated, and some of them take a big jump to understand because they're not a part of the culture that most of us grew up with. But they're a fascinating way of looking at the body and a viable alternative to and complementary alternative to the Western medicine that we use today. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I will come to a diagnosis and treatment with someone. So, to begin, I'd like to talk to you, as I said, about some of the Western studies that have been done. One of the first ones that really made a big impact was looking at the way acupuncture released endorphins into the body. And endorphins are our own natural feel-good chemicals, and they found that they actually bind at the same site that morphine does. And so when acupuncture promotes the endorphins, people feel good and they feel relaxed. When they're relaxed, they're not as stressed, their muscles relax. It's a very good thing in general. And a lot of people exercise for that very reason, and that's a wonderful thing. So that was one of the very big studies that first happened. There's been lots and lots of other research and lots of ongoing research. They're using lots of high-tech tools now. Ultrasound can show that acupuncture stimulates blood flow in an area. Thermal imaging, where they are looking at heat-sensitive areas, shows that acupuncture will increase tissue repair and decrease inflammation. Inflammation shows up as heat, and that goes down with the acupuncture. And then there's also neuroimaging, MRIs, that can show how pain is changed compared to before and after an acupuncture treatment, how the brain is receiving the pain signals and the neural signals. There's a lot of interesting work going on, and in our very own state, a wonderful woman who is up at the University of Vermont named Dr. Helen Langevin, and she's both a medical doctor and has a degree in acupuncture and oriental medicine. So she's very, very well qualified for the research that she's doing, which is very fascinating. The NIH, the National Institute of Health in our country here, has recommended that acupuncture can be helpful, for instance, for arthritis in the knee, low back pain, headaches. It can be used for decreasing cravings in people who have addictions, and that includes smoking, alcohol, and other addictions. And for the side effects of chemotherapy, when people are very weak, it can be very helpful with the nausea, which is also something it's sometimes used for in the early stages of pregnancy, when women have morning sickness, but they don't want to be taking any drugs for that. And it's also come into its own in terms of being helpful for people going through infertility. And a part of that, again, goes back to that reduction of stress. It's a stressful thing going through infertility, and if you're less stressed, there's more likely that everything's going to flow the way it's supposed to. So that's just a quick overview of the Western studies that are being done today. There's a lot of information at the National Institute of Health, and you can plug in acupuncture, oriental medicine, and you'll get limitless hits just about. So before moving on to the modalities that I work with, which are my tools, the tools in my toolbox, I just want to speak just for a moment about Qi, which is the underpinning of this medicine. And it's really the belief that we have a life force in us that moves in us. It moves the blood in us, and it helps nourish the body. The blood nourishes the body. The Qi moves the blood. And when it gets stuck, that's when the imbalances happen in our body. And it's often discussed in terms of, as you can see my lovely model here, and you'll see the lines that she has. There are 14 main meridians in the body, and the acupuncture, which I'll speak to next, accesses the Qi within those meridians or channels or rivers almost, to allow us to move the Qi around, to reduce the imbalances by lessening stagnation or bringing energy to an area that isn't being energized. And a lot of illness and pain is due to that blockage. And sometimes it can be from any number, it can be from illnesses, it can be from trauma, car accidents or other accidents. It can be from extremely stressful situations that basically kind of shut us right down and stop us from being able to live the life that we want. And the acupuncture can be really helpful in resetting the balance and getting our autonomic nervous system back up and going again. Just going on then, I just want to move on to acupuncture being, of course, what's most well known about Oriental medicine. And as you can see with my little array of goodies here, I have, I think you can see that these are some of the needles that are used in acupuncture. The one that I use most often is about 0.2 millimeters thick. And you can see by the size of the dime, they go 0.2, 0.18, 0.16, eensy weensy, very tiny. So because they're so very thin, most people don't feel them even going in. You might feel them when they get to the point. There'll be a sense of like, whoa, a release. And oftentimes if it's in a muscle that's very tight, there's a sense of like, oh, wow, that just feels great, because that muscle that was so tight has just like opened right up. So for just a very quick example, I'm going to show you what it looks like to have a needle. I'm going to do it on myself. And as I said, in the next segment of this series, I will be doing a treatment, a very small treatment on a patient, a mock patient, and we'll be doing some needles on that. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that. So I'm just going to do, this is a pretty well-known point. This is large intestine 4 right here. It moves a lot of qi. The acupuncture points, while I'm getting this ready, are all have function in terms of Chinese medicine. So they'll have up to 6 functions. They work with areas of the body, sometimes far away from where they're located. And then they'll be like cooling the blood if someone's very hot, or warming the body if they're very cold, and stopping diarrhea, or helping the stomach and the spleen transform in the body. So here I'm just going to do a quick showing of how we do the needles, and just to also emphasize that these are single-use needles. This is regulated really in the state of Vermont and in the US, and one use, and they go right into the biohazard container, which ships off to biohazard heaven, and they're not used again. So contamination really is not an issue. So here I am. I use a guide tube, which is this this little plastic tube, which kind of helps spread out the skin a little bit. And there, I tap it in. I put it in a little bit further. I actually didn't even feel that one. I must have really good qi. No, I don't know. This is a very thin needle. Usually the needles are left in about 15-20 minutes. It really helps the area around, again, going back to the Western medicine, sort of looking at decreasing the inflammation. So I'm going to take that out. No blood. Putting it in the biohazard container, and I will wipe that just to make sure. So as you can see, it's a fairly less invasive than definitely what most of us grew up with getting all sorts of shots as we were growing up. These are very small, and a lot of people don't feel them. There's few side effects. There's rarely blood, and there's very rarely bruising unless someone's on Coumadin or a blood thinner. I just wanted to give you a really good sense of the acupuncture end of things. We'll use anywhere between 10 maybe to 15 needles, and sometimes I'll do the back side and sometimes the front. As you can see, there's many points on the back and the front. There's about 361 points. And I'm just reaching down here to show you, this is a book that we studied from, and you'll learn about in the history. It shows like where the points are, how to needle them, and all of the information about each of the points. There's a lot of information. And I'll tell you a little bit more about when this book was written, when we get to the history part. And just to make it really clear that acupuncture is not for everybody, and I understand that. Sometimes people are very sensitive to needles, or they're very afraid of them, and that's how it is. So acupressure is also a tool in my toolkit, and that's basically, again, accessing the qi in the meridians and at the points by holding the points and not using the needles. So don't be afraid to try Chinese medicine, even if you're afraid of the needles. I would never use needles on someone who was afraid of them. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that it's something that's available to everybody. Okay, now for herbal medicine. So we're going to move over to the right-hand side here. Herbal medicine is a very old part of Chinese medicine. And I brought in some different examples. I brought in here in the front are some of the fresh examples of some of the herbs that we use in the apothecary. You know, there's thousands of herbs, of course, in the world, but we will often use in a regular herbal pharmacy, maybe about 450 herbs that are used in about 250 formulas. And you know, you have a formula that might have 5 to 10 herbs in it, and then you add in different herbs for each particular person. So you can see some of these are very, very common. Ginger root warms the body. There's mint that cools the body. This is clematis, which warms channels and collaterals, tiny little. It's helpful actually for, it's not this particular clematis, but the clematis that's used is one that warms the channels, especially for people with arthritis. A cattail, the pollen in that moves the blood. You know, there's mushrooms, cinnamon that warms, tangerine peel and different bitter orange. These move the chi in the body. Then there's, this is actually something I cut off my, a limb of my magnolia tree. So magnolia bark and flower are both used. This is a peony root. Peony root is very, very common. The white peony root helps the liver do its job. And I just want to emphasize that when I talk about liver or spleen or any of these organs, it's not the organ itself I'm talking about. I'm talking about the system and the function that it has in the body. So if I say that your liver is stagnant, it doesn't mean there's anything going on with the liver itself, but the function of the liver is not doing its job. It's out of balance. So these are the raw herbs. These are usually dried. Traditionally, they're put into a concoction that you boil at home and make a tea. And then that's changed every few days depending on what your symptoms are doing. These days, that's a little bit more complicated for a lot of people, spending an hour, you know, doing the boiling. So there's tea pills, which are just a specific formula, or sometimes there's granules, which are the herbs that have been cooked together and then dehydrated. I often use, it's a tincture, and again, it's the formula or the herbs cooked together, dehydrated with a very little bit of alcohol. These are nothing like Western herbal formulas, which are often can be high alcohol. And then in my own apothecary, my pharmacy, I have, again, probably about 400 some herbs, and I'll have formulas, and then I'll add other herbs into the formulas, into the tinctures, which I find are sometimes easier for people to take. Like they'll have time to do it during the day. They might not have time to boil. This is the very traditional way of doing it. So a few other tools in my toolbox that I want to tell you about. Moxibustion is compressed artemisia or mugwort. And you can see it comes in a number of different forms. It's warmed and used to heat the body and the points to achieve moving the chi and moving stagnation. So you can see there's like little moxa cones that you can put on top of the actual needle, which will allow the needle to be warm inside. Cupping is a very, very common tool in my toolbox, and it moves stagnation. Again, lots of moving the chi, keeping that chi moving is a big piece of what we're doing. And if you don't have a lot of chi, finding ways with the moxa to tonify you, to give you more energy. And this is the traditional, this is it's called the fire cup, and you take a lighted cotton ball and you put it in, and then you put it down on the person. And the cotton ball actually pulls out the oxygen and creates a suction. This is a more modern version with a valve, which you put like a valve suction vacuum on top, and it pulls up to the exact amount of suction that you want. So those are very helpful in moving stagnation. A few other things that I'll mention: Tui Na, which is really the massage, the manual therapy that we use. Qigong. Qigong is the working of one's own qi for self-healing or cultivation. Sometimes it's used by martial artists to help them become more sensitive to the movement of the qi in their bodies. And then, of course, there's dietary and lifestyle advice that we give. There's a whole arm of Chinese medicine that's just about the diet and which foods are actually helpful for different conditions. Again, that's a very important part of what we do. For instance, when I think about spleen qi deficiency, there's a lot of damp with that. And doesn't mean that the spleen has damp, the actual physical spleen, but the ability, it's kind of sluggish. It doesn't work that well. Well, the thing that the spleen doesn't like is cold. So if you're eating a quart of ice cream every day, you're going to make your spleen qi very unhappy. So one of my pieces of advice would be definitely to cut back on the ice cream. And that would help, like with the treatment plan that I was planning, if you had spleen qi deficiency. So that's some of the tools that we use. Just really quickly, in terms of history, the first bone needle has been traced back to between 10,000 and 40,000 years ago. And then in about 1600 BC, they found etchings traced back to that time that depicted acupuncture and moxibustion. Bronze, around the mid-400s BC, bronze needles have been traced back. They found gold and silver needles in a tomb traced to 130 BC. But in terms of acupuncture, the real big breakthrough was the first book that was written in 200 BC called The Yellow Emperor's Treatise on Internal Disease. And there's still information from that book that we are using today in modern Chinese medicine. In about 200 and the mid-200s AD, 260 AD or so, a Chinese doctor put together 12 volumes of all the information surrounding acupuncture and the points. So it was sort of like condensed and collated at that point. And again in about 1020 AD or so, and at that time the first bronze casting, life-size bronze castings with the acupuncture points were being used at that time, and they were used in schools that were teaching about acupuncture, very similar to what we're doing today, with very similar points. So you can see how old this medicine is, and it's been used on millions of people very successfully. And the book that I showed you, that again, I'll bring it up again, this manual of acupuncture, most of what this book was written in about the Ming Dynasty, which was like around 1400, 1500. So most of this information is from there, if not before. So that's a long time. All right, so in terms of herbal medicine, which was kind of parallel and coming along with some similar theories, the earliest book was the 3rd century BC, and then the most famous book is the Shanghanlan. And of course I have that with me, because the Shanghanlan, stemming from about 200 AD again, this book is still in use today, and it's very relevant. It talks about, it's also the 6th level or 6 stages. It talks about how diseases go from the outside of us into the inside, and tells us how to prevent ourselves from, as practitioners, from pushing the disease further or from preventing it from escaping it. It tells pathways for allowing disease to go from wherever it's gotten stuck to be released. So this is a very old book and very important book. All right, so that's a little bit of the history. Chinese medicine, of course, didn't stay in China. It spread to Japan in about 6th century AD, and it turned, they really changed it, and it became a much more herbal oriented, and it's something called Campo, which is just a whole different form of herbal medicine from what traditional Chinese medicine is. And just as a side note, something that was interesting, acupuncture was considered a great profession, and it was only given to the blind in Japan for years and years because they were the ones that had the most sensitivity. It was believed that they were the ones that were most able to feel what was going on. In the 8th to 10th century, Vietnam saw the incoming of Chinese medicine, and then in about the 16th century or so, Jesuit missionaries brought back Chinese medicine to France, and France started working with it at that time. So Europe has had Chinese medicine for a long time, much longer than the United States. There was a man named J.R. Worsley who became very well known for founding the 5-element school of medicine. It's a Chinese medicine pulled from very old texts, and that's been disseminated around the world. And here in the United States, we finally caught up with the rest of the world in about 1970. That was when a reporter from the New York Times in the early 70s got ill with an appendicitis and ended up going through some operations using just needles, and had post-operative care with just needles, and did really well, and brought back that information, and that was the beginning. And now in the States today, there's many specialties. There's sports medicine, there's infertility, and there's more than 50 colleges in general to be licensed. In the 42 states that have licensing, you need to have graduated from an accredited college. My college, the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, the master's degree was a 3-year degree, 3 full years with the clinic going through the summer, and more than 3,500 hours of clinic and theory. So it's not a small time investment. It's quite a lot to become an acupuncturist, and then you have to license yourself in your home state and keep up your continuing education requirements on a yearly basis. All right, so again, just some of the concepts I had said I want to talk about. So one of the things that's hard sometimes for Western civilization to grasp is the concept of yin and yang. And I have a picture here. Here's my picture of yin and yang. So yin and yang are opposites but interconnected. And you can see some of the things that they're characteristic of, like yang is light and warm, yin is moist, cool, dark, but they're connected. There's always, yin is within yang and yang is within yin. In the middle of the night, there's still the promise of dawn. And it's always moving, and it's always moving around. And that's what this is. Yang has a little bit of yin, yin has some yang. So that's a very brief overview. In terms of the organ systems, there's yin and yang organ pairs, and they really speak to function or storage. And the yin organs have a lot of function connected with each of the main 5 yin organs. The yang organs are more about storing. So, for instance, you think of the large intestine, it's storing the bowel as it moves through, in Chinese medicine, the spleen is what transforms. It's the idea of the spleen that transforms the food. So if you have indigestion and you're having hard times, then it's the spleen that is out of harmony, the spleen system that is out of harmony. there's 5 elements. Here's another picture. So here are the 5 elements. And you can see that these are those yin organs that I spoke to. And they each have an element, and they have a season associated with them. So in the spring, there's the liver, which is wood. And the summer is fire and heart. The earth is in the late summer with the spleen. The lung is metal and autumn, and the kidneys are winter and water. They have a lot of other characteristics, emotional, they have tissues connected to them, but they interact with each other. Wood interacts with fire, but also it interacts with earth, and I think that's a very common interaction that you'll see. Wood really, the liver really helps keep our energy and our chi moving, and if our liver system isn't working very well, then it can't help the food transform, the earth food transform, and then we start to have diarrhea or bowel symptoms or gas or bloating. So that's when the wood, the liver, has overacted on the earth. That's just an example of that. As I mentioned before, there's the 6 levels, and that's from the Shanghanlun. See, again, these are old texts that are interwoven through this whole medicine and have been going on for a very long time. Something called the 8 principles, which, and these all help us in our work in diagnosing. The 8 principles are yin and yang, they're interior or exterior, they're heat and cold, or deficiency and excess. And when we have a sense of where a person is with those 8 principles, it gives us a much better idea of, for instance, do we want to do warm herbs because they're cold? And, you know, each of the herbs has many characteristics with it. And so it's really an important part of our diagnosis. So we ask people, how are they doing? And we have lots of questions. Sometimes it's called the 10 asking songs or the 10 asking questions. And they're about your sleep, the urine, your emotional state, your temperature, that's really important, what your thirst is like, your bowel movements, your energies. These are the asking ones. These are questions we ask that you tell us how you're feeling, and we have specific questions with that. We also look at the pulses. The pulses are very different from the pulses that are taken in Western medicine. There's systems, there's lots of different systems, of course, because medicine has moved around the world. But in general, you could say there's 3 positions on each wrist, on the radial artery, and they correspond to either a yin-yang pair or sometimes just the yin organ is looked at. So for instance, on the left arm, it's the heart, the liver, and the kidney yin. And you can look at the different levels. Is it a pounding pulse way out at the, right at the tip of the finger? Or do you have to push really hard to get there? There's qualities involved with the pulses, like wiry and thready, slippery. And I'm telling you, it takes a long, long time. You have to feel 10,000 pulses to know one. It's a long time to grasp those really very subtle differences in the different kinds of pulses. We also look at the tongue. We'll ask people to open up their mouth and stick out their tongues. And we're looking at, is there a covering? Is there a thickness? A thick white covering is sometimes an indication of damp, or if it's peeled, or if there's cracks down the middle. And it talks to different areas of the tongue which are connected to different organ systems. The lung, the heart is at the tip. So if there's a lot of redness at the tip, there might be heart heat going on, which you would probably feel in the pulse. These are all the pieces that we're using. We're looking at the body, we're listening, we're smelling, and we're taking into consideration all these pieces to put together a diagnosis. And once we have that diagnosis, what is underlying these signs and symptoms? We're not just trying to fix the one piece. We want to know what brought you to that. So once we have that diagnosis, Then we can put together the treatment plan, which involves acupuncture, moxa, cupping, and herbs. And over time, as you come in, you know, sometimes it'll take a while to resolve very chronic conditions in particular. You know, some of those acupuncture prescriptions might be different from time to time as things resolve and, you know, maybe move from deep inside to the exterior. So, in conclusion, I just want to say that I hope you now understand how very complicated this medicine is. This was a very, very brief overview of some of the underpinnings of where the medicine came from and what makes it such an applicable and viable complementary medicine in our world today. There's a lot of conditions that are very complicated that acupuncture and Chinese medicine and herbal medicine are well suited for working with. I'm just going to say in finality, I have my name, Molly Beveridge, my acupuncture website, which is MeadowayRiverAcupuncture.com, my phone number, 802-384-0310. Feel free to call me and ask me anytime if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer. I also want to put out just a quick brief mention about the Vermont Acupuncture Association and the fact that we are trying very hard at the state level to promote insurance companies having them incorporate acupuncture into their programs so that everyone can be covered. So you can go to our website, the VermontVTAA.org, and find out more about that. Because at this point, acupuncture is covered by very few insurance companies, and not by Medicare and not by Medicaid. You can also, if you're looking for a practitioner, you can check out the Vermont Acupuncture site, or you can go to the National Certification Commission of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, which is nccaom.org, and find out there's practitioners listed on the website that have been certified. And finally, if you're interested in more information, Yin and Yang House has a tremendous wealth of information that'll go into way more detail than I've given you today. So thank you very much, and I look forward to showing you what a real treatment looks like in segment 2.